I do believe that Christians live more by sight than by faith. Now, you should go home and meditate on that and write down why that's true, because it is. Anyway, and here's what I mean. Okay. Most believers need continual experiences. And I shared that I have shared my story about for the first time. Now, it was over 40 years ago. I'm not going to rehash it. All I'm saying is the experience that I had turned me into a tither for life. It's like, I really don't need you. That's good. I'm good. I'm good for life. Now, I know most people aren't, but I am. Things get tight, or things got tight. We've always tied. We just never stopped, because we don't do that. Now, I know the average person probably struggles because you need that booster shot. All right? Prayer, that's our topic. And let me tell you something. I've had some huge answers. And like you, I'm not satisfied, not at all. But I am a lifer. And so I pray every day. I might not get the answers I want. They may not come as quickly as I want. But as we begin the book of 1 Samuel, we meet a woman named Hannah, desperately wants a child, particularly a son, and she's prayed for years, and she didn't quit. Now, by now, I'm sure you've read ahead, you know the story, and she has a son, and so on. Also, as I look back on my life, I've seen the sovereignty of God illustrated, so I really have no problem trusting in the sovereignty of God today. Because here's the deal. Today is confusing. A year, 5 years, 10 years, it's all clear. You got that? So confusion today, clarity tomorrow. Now, look, I've had my share. Look, when my fiance of way back broke up with me, I was confused. I mean, we were going to get married just a few more months. I'm like confused. Why? Why? Oh, I look back now, it's clear. It's clear. I mean, I was devastated at the time, but you think I'm devastated anymore? Not at all. My kids should be incredibly believing the of God. I mean, they should, because they wouldn't be here today. I mean, you know. So that should affect my theology. And so we're going to talk about the sovereignty of God and how it plays out in Hannah's life. And once again, as I said, this is your autobiography. You should be interested in it, because this is what you will, one day, you will write your story, per se, and this is what this is how it's going to play out. I think back history. I like history. And so, in England, back in 1605, the notorious Guy Fawkes, he plotted to kill the English Parliament and King James I. And you're like, well, that's not that big of a deal. And, you know, a lot of religious stuff was going on back in those days. And I'm not going to relive all that. I want you to think about that for a moment. King James I. Isn't he the one that got the group of scholars together, Bible scholars, and had a brand new English translation in 1611? Oh, so how did all that unfold? You could worry, but it was incredible how the plot was discovered, because all the dynamite was behind stuff and you really couldn't see it, but one thing led to another, and the plot was discovered. And so every year, November 5th, in England, they even burn this guy's, in effigy. So, I mean, but think about the sovereignty of God. I mean, the King James Version, I know probably nobody here reads that. That was the only Bible I memorized, 70s and 80s. That's what I read. That's what I grew up on. I'm the King James Bible. And it was the Bible for the English people for like 400 years. The impact it's had on Christianity is incredible. The city of God worked that out. You know, now I know today we've got multitudes of translations. Most of the verses I put in your notes are from the English Standard. My personal study Bible at home, you know, it's just a big New American Standard Bible. That's just what I've used for years, and that's what I use. I like other translations, but what can I say? Most everything I memorized was out of the King James. Just the way it is. But the impact of King James the First. But God has His purposes and the sovereignty of God. And we say, boy, he was lucky. Yeah, because God's in control. God is in control. And there are simply things you cannot explain outside the sovereignty of God. I mean, do you believe that God controls history, world events? I mean, our appreciation for God is greatly affected when we meditate on His acts. You find this a lot in the Bible and in the Psalms when the psalmist is praying. We're going to get to Hannah's prayer eventually, and she is meditating on the acts of God in her life. That will affect your prayer life. Meditating on the cross and the suffering that Jesus went through. And it's incredible. It's incredible. Do you realize what would happen if God took His hand off the wheel of the universe? It'd be utter chaos. Years ago, while I was in construction and we were erecting the steel in Gaithersburg, Maryland, on an expansion of a big office building called Maycom, and so we're out there. You know, we had this old crane. It was a great crane. It was a workhorse, and it had no hydraulic. It had a lot of things that just, you know, it was old. But anyway, it was a great crane. So we were going to brand new load line on it, all right? So this is like hundreds of. So we pulled it into the parking lot. Now the parking lot was like this, all right? But it's all asphalt. So we pulled it into the parking lot, and then we parked it there, and then we laid the boom down, and I forget how big the boom was, and let's just say about 165 feet or something. I don't know. So we laid the boom down. All right. And it's one of these pipe booms, that you know. All right, like a ladder. Okay, so we laid it down. All right, so we're up on the crane, about 4 of us at the time, and we're feeding the spool. Now, the crane had diesel motors, a diesel motor, crane, diesel motor, and we had this crane operator, and his name was Shorty. And, he's about this tall, but he was a good guy and good crane operator. And so we're up there on the crane, and all of a sudden, the crane starts rolling. I didn't know what to do. I jumped in the cab as quick as I could to hit the brakes. Guess what? The motor wasn't running. By the time I started, I could start the motor, build up enough air pressure to stop the crane. Now, remember, it was like this. We're rolling down here. Now, when it got down to the end of the parking lot, there is a bank like that. Are you with me? Steep bank. So, guess where I'm going? I'm in the driver's seat. I can't bail out. I don't know what would happen to me if I did. If I had thought fast enough, maybe I could have, but I didn't jump out. So we went down, and the bumper of the crane, now the bumper of the crane is like this tall, this wide, this thick. It's solid steel for like counterweight. Well, it hit the dirt, and when it did, you have to understand, we're going down like that. So guess where the crane boom is? It's straight up in the air. Then the crane flattened out and went like that. And when it did, the crane boom came. And I mean, it was a chaos. It was kaboom. People are scattering. Everybody in the office is looking out like, what in the world just happened? Chaos. Because the crane operator did not know that the brakes would not hold if the motor wasn't running. Turn the motor off, the brakes release, chaos. If God were to take His hands off sustaining the world. We are chaos, utter chaos. I mean, we live in a fascinating universe. Biologists are fascinated by just a single cell and how it functions. But anyway, the sovereignty of God, who providentially sustains the entire universe. Let's get back to prayer, though. I mean, it's a bigger deal than you think. Did you know that prayer affects your entire walk with God? In one of the largest studies ever done on discipleship, 8 attributes were discovered in the lives of believers who were progressing towards spiritual maturity. So I'm just going to list the 8 quickly, all right? So try to get these. And Bible engagement, all right? And we'll just leave them up on the screen for you. Obeying God and denying self. Serving God and others. Sharing Christ. Exercising faith. Seeking God. Building relationships. And then unashamed transparency. In other words, you're able to have honest and open conversations about your life. All right? All right? You know, it's funny. When you go in, when I went in, I mean, okay, and you know, I dealt with cancer for a few years, and then until I had it removed. But when you go in, I mean, they give you like 100 questions. I mean, they want to know every single detail about your life, and you have to be totally open and honest because they need to know everything. I mean, like everything, you know. And but you've got to be open. But Christianity sometimes we hide stuff because you know I can't let people know that you know I got this whatever in my life. Which is really fascinating because you have to be honest and open and transparent. All right, but here's the deal. Okay, and you say, well, Mike, okay, so I'd look at all 8 areas. Okay, so that's the output goal. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so here's a person really good with Bible engagement, really good at sharing their faith and all the others. Okay, so what do I have to do? Because there are things you have to do to arrive there. And in all 8, now they're not all the same. You don't do the same thing to get better or to progress in each one. But you know what every 8 involves? Your prayer life. Your prayer life. So if my prayer life is out of whack, there's just no way I can progress to spiritual maturity. It's going to affect everything in my life. No wonder prayer made it into the Bible. I mean, it's full of instruction, hope, encouragement, especially for those who've prayed a long time for a particular need. But I want to go beyond just praying. I think that's been abused, the word, yeah, I pray. Okay, cool, I guess. I'm not so sure all praying is prayer. So I'm not really concerned about the stats that tell us how many people, oh yeah, 79% pray every week or every day. Really? Really? You look around the country, you buy into that? I'm not really concerned about that. And that's not our focus, because our focus on this particular series is answered prayer. Are you with me? I assume some of you would like to have an answer. Now look, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Hannah's been praying, but it's been a long time. I mean, it's been, we said 5 years at least. And the answer seems to have gotten hung up in the clouds somewhere. I don't know. You know, I was before the days of cloud computing, but I know this, God's timing is impeccable. And of course, I know over the course of time, we feel like we've been forgotten. You ever been forgotten? Now, I don't remember it because I was too little, but way back when my mom had 4 kids, we all went to the store, I guess. That's what I've been told. And then she got 3 of the 4 loaded into the car. That's not bad. Is that it, right? Unless you're the one that got left out. That was me, left on the sidewalk. She gets down the road, comes back. There I am, right where she left me, standing, except I'm crying now because I'm there alone. But to be forgotten. Nobody likes to be forgotten. You know, I don't remember that one, but I do remember the time we went to a junior high party and a girl I was interested in, she ignored me the entire evening. And I can't emphasize that. I still remember it. I'm still working through it in therapy. But I mean, it's just, but to be forgotten is just, it's horrible. Horrible. And I'll bet you everybody in here has been forgotten. And Hannah, we're going to see in her prayer, she wants to be remembered. She wants to be remembered. So let's read about that. Well, we left off last week. Hannah's in tears. Many of the Psalms are full of tears. I just want to ask you, when was the last time you wept? Well, I didn't say it should happen every day. All right, let's go on. Here we go. 1 Samuel 1. All right, here we are. Okay, so after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Interesting phrase there. Hannah got up. Hannah rose. It's a little subtle hint that this is a turning point. Ooh, just a little. Just a little hint. It's like starting a car. Oh, hey, I heard it fire. Now, if you've had a hard time getting your vehicle started, or you were doing some work, that's a good sign. Like, okay, I think we're on the verge of getting it started. Could be your lawnmower. I don't know. All right. Now, Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord, and she was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. You ever just weep uncontrollably? Why, you know? I ask that because I just want you to just look into your prayer life and ask if some normal, and I say normal because the Psalms are tears, it should be. Now, I don't have a chart. I wept once the water. No, it's not that. It's just that, have you ever, I don't know. I mean, how many times have you desperately prayed for something? All right. Well, after she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant. You might want to highlight the word affliction. And remember me, and not forget your servant. But will give to your servant a son, then I will give to the Lord all the days of my life, and no razor shall touch his head. Okay, boy, that's a lot to cover right there. Here's what I know. One day at church, things changed. Now, and it did for me. See, I told you this was an autobiography. Now, maybe it's just me, but I think it's everybody in here. And I've told you the story before, perhaps, but I was living in Cleveland, Tennessee, went to church on a Sunday night to hear an evangelist, and I am walking with God, serving God. I mean, I'm doing all that. But that night, God spoke to me, and I said, I am renewing my vows, my commitment to the Lord. Sunday night. Monday morning, my fiance was with me. My entire life changed that night. Now, I know the average believer does not think when they get up and go to church on a Sunday morning, life could change today. Because we don't live by faith, we live by sight. Well, nothing happened last week, just a normal service. I think we could go to the beach this week. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take a vacation and all that. I'm not. just don't know that we show up in faith. That's all. And I look back, and seriously, I think, what if I had missed that church service? That's a scary thought. I mean, my kids should think that. What if Dad had married that woman? Well, they'd never know it. Oh, I'm saying, one church service changed my life. Now, once again, autobiography for me, maybe not for you, but I think it will be. I just don't know when or how. And I think, well, what if Hannah had bailed and quit going to church a month earlier? Wow. I don't know. I know. Going to church is something we do. Don't have any high hopes. Most Sundays are fairly normal. I get all that. Wow. Well, let's go a little further. Affliction. Notice her affliction. It's affliction that drives us to the throne of grace. And because that's what we need. That's what we need. And then she said, remember me. Now, that's a fascinating phrase in the Testament. It's actually an action word. And what she is praying, God, I want you to act in my life. I want you to actually do something. I don't want you just to remember me, like recall my name or anything. And, okay, we do this thing. Let's say there's a big concert coming up next Friday night in town. Tickets are hard to get. And you tell somebody, let's just say Todd tells Charles, hey, I'm going to talk to a guy this week. I might be able to get like 6 tickets. And Charles might tell Todd, don't forget about me. Now, what's Charles saying? Just call my name? No, he's saying, I'd like to get a ticket if you get the 6, right? So I want you to act on my behalf. That's what it means in the Bible. So when you see the phrase, remember me, it's God to act in my life. I want you to actually do something. Unfortunately, people forget. Do they not? We might even forget God. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, God said, take care lest you forget. Lest you forget. What if I forget that Sunday night service? What if I forget what God did when I tithed for the first time? What if I forget some of the answers to prayer? And I've had some huge ones get answered. That's not good. And God said, don't be careful that you don't forget me and my commandments and rules and statutes. Lest when, look, because you know what? You get into the promised land, things will go pretty well for you, and you'll eat, you'll be full, you're going to build some nice homes. Oh, wow, you're going to have nice houses. And the livestock is going to be out of this world, and you're going to have some extra money floating around. and you're kind of getting a little ego trip, you know, get lifted up, all that. And you're going to forget me. You're going to forget me. And you're going to forget that I actually brought you out of Egypt where you were slaves. You're going to forget all that. Could you imagine crossing the Red Sea? Could you imagine forgetting that? Well, you don't want God to forget you, and God doesn't want you to forget him. Back to the story. Could it? God works in mysterious ways. And look, if you're Hannah, and we said from the outset that apparently, and the Bible doesn't say, but I think this is the way it normally worked out in that culture, that Elkanah would have married Hannah, and after a period of time, it was obvious she couldn't have kids, and kids were necessary in an agrarian society. And it was also not unusual for a guy to take a second wife who could have kids. And not that that was the right thing to do, and we talked about that. But so then Elkanah marries Peninnah, and so, but see, Elkanah really loved Hannah. That was his love. I mean, Peninnah is just like a facilitator to have kids. I mean, that's kind of, All right, so now Peninnah gets married, and she wants to be loved, and Hannah wants to have kids, but Peninnah, a little bit of friction there, and we talked about that last week, and Peninnah really ran things into the ground, and she was like Hannah's thorn in the flesh. But that's what drove Hannah to pray. Now, I'm just going to raise the question, all right? I just want you to think about it. I don't really have an answer. But would Hannah have prayed so earnestly and desperately if she had not been driven by the emotional torture of Peninnah? I mean, I just want you to think about that. I'm not going to spend much time on that. Okay, I brought a map of France, all right? So I thought we'd do a little geography here this morning. So I want to go back to the 1500s, early 1500s. And John Calvin, who, he's somewhat of a household name. That's where the Presbyterian Church came from. A lot of Reformed theology and all that. Good stuff. I mean, Calvin was a brilliant, brilliant guy. And like 1504, and okay, we're in France. He was in France at the university and all that, and then he needed to go. A lot of stuff going on, religious stuff. So he wanted to go to Strasbourg. You see Strasbourg? It's a way to the right. All right, so boom, straight shot. Except Francis I and Charles V, they're having a little skirmish between them. So we got some military equipment in the roads and a little stuff going on. So John Calvin could not go straight across. So he said, well, fine. I'll go south and go through Lyon, and then I'll work my way up to Geneva. So he did. So he takes off, goes through Lyon, gets to Geneva, and spends the night. Now he's going to Strasbourg. The next morning, a guy by the name of William Farrell gets up and basically gets in John Calvin's face and says, you better stay here. Basically, he said, or I'm going to pray God will kill you. I mean, he was just real forceful, all right? You need to stay right here in Geneva and do your work, for the Reformation and all that. If you know church history, or any history, that was the spot where John Calvin made his mark. Could we not say that God used the disruption between Francis I and Charles V to get Calvin to Geneva? See, so many times, I'm telling you, it's confusing until you look back. And now we look back and it's so clear that God was in control. It's just an incredible, incredible thing. Now, I can't prove that, but I am asking you to think about that. Wow. I mean, from the human side, we'd say war put Calvin in Geneva. I don't know. Or God did. However you want to say it. It's just an interesting question. And could we not say the same thing about Peninnah? That her emotional torture of Hannah changed the course of history. Because we go from Samuel, who anoints Saul as king, and then anoints David. I mean, anyway. All right, one more thought. All right, and I'm still in the introduction. We'll get through the text. We'll go verse by verse. Maybe you need to go the extra mile. Let me say it like this in your prayers. Once again, it's not a formula, but Jesus did say in Matthew 7:7, ask and it will be given to you, and sometimes that's all you need to do. Or you might need to go a little further and seek, and you'll find. You see that? Or it might be that you'll actually have to knock. So we got to ask, seek, and knock. Okay, so earlier I mentioned the possibility of moving from the school. All right, so let me just illustrate that. All right. Okay, so for several days, I don't know when I started, but I was thinking, the school's it's a fine place to meet or whatever. I just would rather not meet here. I mean, it's just me personally. So I just thought about the possibility of finding a more conducive place to meet, all right, besides the school. So I just prayed about it. Man, that's where I started. I prayed about it, all right? So I am praying, and I don't know, Tuesday morning in my prayer time, I just thought, okay, oh, what a brilliant idea. So I get my iPad out, and I look at all the buildings, all right, from here to the church property, all right? And trying to look at a place that might be, a conducive, available, or whatever for our needs. All right, so I landed. I saw nothing till I got to GE. Now, GE's got a couple buildings out there, and it had Micro Air listed. Now, I just want here's how it worked for me. So I knew Micro Air was now meeting in this post office building. Are you with me? In this big new building over here up Airport Road. So I'm like, well, I know it might not be up to date, right? Because things can change. And so I was like, well, I'll bet they have some space available, but I don't know because I think Micro Air has gone. Are you with me? So Wednesday, I had lunch with a guy, and I said, well, I'm going to swing by GE. So I swing by GE Wednesday afternoon, walk in, I meet the receptionist, and I said, well, I noticed that Micro Air is no longer leasing. Oh, no, they're right there. Okay? Now, this is a huge building right next to the main building. Oh, they're in that building. Okay. Well, we didn't want that building anyway. So she brings this guy down, and his name is Phil, and Phil comes down, and I said, Phil, look, we're interested. I don't know about this last building over here, the furthest one, the closest one to our property. But, would you be interested in leasing, renting some space, on Sunday mornings like 9 to 12 or whatever? And he looks at me and he says, wow, what a fortuitous conversation. He said, just this week, we have decided to come up with a plan to lease that building or in parts of it or whatever. He said, now, you know how things work in corporate world. Call me in 2 months. Now, here's all I'm saying. I prayed about it. Then I sought, I seeked. I just did what I could. Then I had to actually go knock on the door, so to speak, because you got to do all three. Now, does that mean I wish I had the gift of faith and I could tell you, kind of like Jerry Falwell, I can see it on the mountain, okay? There's part of me that feels like, yeah, I believe God will probably give us space there to rent. I don't know. I'm not, But I did what I could, prayed about it, and all that. I'm just saying you have to ask, seek, and knock. Now, another thing I know, and I was talking to Todd this week because we met on Friday, and I said, here's the deal, and he's in the car business and at the BMW dealer. And I said, have you ever noticed that all the car dealers are together? I said, why is that? Well, he said, well, because when people look for cars, they go to all the dealerships. Yeah, because maybe you don't want to you look at the BMW, say, let's go over here, the Toyota. Well, same thing with churches. I mean, and there are 3 other churches up there, and not everybody that comes to New Hope wants to go to New Hope, and not everybody that goes to those other churches choose to go there, right? So, but they'll go to another church because we'll go check that out. And that could be a conducive meeting place because people are looking for a church home, all right? And then, but it'd be nice. We'd like to get right to where we are. Then the transition is easy from that to, our building. But you do the same thing when you share your faith, all right? So, you pray. You pray for people, right, that don't go to church. And so you pray for them. And then number 2, you seek. You look for opportunities to share or talk. There are times I will meet or get together with a lost person or somebody who is out of church. I don't even bring church up. No, I try to just be a little strategic. But then, at some point you have to knock. And, you got to be a little more proactive. So I had lunch with a friend. He's lost. His wife is lost. And I'm going to try to get them here on Mother's Day. But we did lunch, and I've invited them to the house, and we've had them to our place before and shared our faith. And I mean, you have to understand, I'm talking about two people that have never gone to church. It's totally, it's just mind-boggling to them. But we're persevering. No answer yet. What do? I bet you got to knock, and so on. And not only that, on Mother's Day, we'll put up this series on Hannah, prayer, and all that. And I think my message title will be "A Believer's or the Believer's New Song." Hey, that's a good time to invite somebody. You know what? Next week's a good time. I'm talking about life, flesh and blood, rubber meets the road. Answered prayer will give you a new song. I'm not talking about it's pouring down rain and God, I'd like to get a parking place close to the store. You know, that's only going to ride so far with you. And that's fine. You want a lot of prayers like that answered. Regular, everyday, good stuff. But I'm talking about the big ones, the desperate ones. And you don't have them your entire life, but you will have some. Here's what I know. God remembered Hannah. You should go home and meditate on that. And what would happen in your life if God remembered you? Let's stand for prayer, shall we?